Hello, and welcome to today's Fireside Q&A. I'm your host, Sean O'Reilly, KingsCrowd CMO, and joining me is KingsCrowd Investment Research Director, Z Zong, and our very special guest, Anthony Cousins, CEO of Factmata, which is currently raising money from the crowd on WeFunder. Hey guys, how's it going?
Great, how are you, Sean?
Very, very well. So thank you both for joining me here today. We've got some time zone diversity. We got Z out on the West Coast, so he just got going today, and Anthony, you're over there in London, so it's, I don't know, it's almost time for you to go grab a pint at the pub, I think.
Have some fish and chips, right?
Yes,
and
fish and chips. Yeah, for sure. Very, very cool. So now for our viewers that are just tuning in, the purpose of this Fireside Chat is to help investors who are considering investing in Factmata to make a better and more fully informed investment decision. KingsCrowd helps investors do this by serving as the go-to source for unbiased independent information on raising money across the online private markets. Aided by our patent-pending Merlin startup ratings algorithm, KingsCrowd provides institutional-grade research, analytical tools, and ratings that empower people to make confident and inspired investments. Now, before we get into investor Q&A, Z, can you tell us a little bit about how KingsCrowd rated Factmata and what our rating means for investors that are tuning in?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sean. Like Sean has said, I'm Z Zong, the director of our investment research team. And KingsCrowd provides analytic research platform for all the online private market investors. So we provide our diligence and our ratings. And we have 4 different ratings: top deal, deal to watch, neutral, and underweight. And for top deals, it represents less than 1% of all the deals that we rate. And top deals and deal to watch represents top 3%, 3 to 5%. And in fact, Meta was rated a top deal in July, and it represents less than 1% of all KC rated deals, and it excels at least 4 out of 5 rating metrics, and those 5 rating metrics are price, market, team, differentiator, and performance.
Very, very cool. Yeah, so Anthony, just for some context, we currently have across our entire database, we rate all Reg CF deals, and currently 735 active raises are currently live that we have ratings on. You are one of just 2 top deals, and you got a perfect 5 out of 5 score. So this is very, very rare. There's currently 27 deal to watches, which is 3.67%. So again, very, very cool. Can you, Anthony, before we went live, you were telling us a really cool story about your career in helping the British Army, I think, and combating fake news, or what became now known as fake news. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how that led you to become involved with and eventually leading Factmata?
Yeah, so that was during the height, I guess, of the Iraq and Afghan conflicts. If anyone hears, I fal like an old person now talking about those things, like everyone
came
back into news.
I know.
Yeah, it came back into news this year, but a lot of people hadn't thought about it in 10 years.
Tony Blair, George W. Bush up on the stage together. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, I was deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan, helping out on kind of media and political affairs. And that's where I was either in Iraq, mostly looking at Al-Qaeda's kind of narratives, or in Afghanistan looking at the Taliban narratives, and really trying to counter those, trying to work out how are they getting their messaging out, what kind of messaging are they using, who are they targeting, and really trying to do what we could with our tool set to counter that. But it was really interesting and really challenging because the Taliban had advantages in terms of their local engagement that we couldn't. Like most of us look like this, so really difficult kind of starting relationships with local trusted sources and trusted people. And then after Afghanistan, I came back to the UK and worked in counterterrorism and did something similar, but looking at the population level and looking primarily at Al-Qaeda's recruitment narratives, what they call the kind of single narrative at the time, basically the way of looking at the world, which changes every fact into a view that the Western world or democracies are anti-Muslim or anti-Islam. So that was their single narrative. Basically, they take every event, they spin it to make it seem like that's the agenda. So that was really interesting and fascinating, and that was actually kind of what gave me my personal passion for it, was going into kind of Muslim youth centers and seeing the impact that had
there in
on
London,
young,
just to be clear.
Exactly, in London, back in the UK, and seeing the impact it had on those children was probably the thing that gave me not just my passion for that particular topic, but my passion for how we take care of what is the truth and how that information is spread. And that's not just through state actors, that's through our own actions, and also the actions of the media. I think at the time, the most powerful influence on some of those young kids was seeing so many anti-Muslim or anti-Islam headlines in traditional mainstream media, to the point where young kids looking you square in the eyes and asking you questions like, "Do I have to be a terrorist when I'm older?" This is very young children, because that's their logic. It's like that's all I see. All I see is that Muslims are terrorists when they look out to the news. So that for me was like, wow, the impact that the mainstream media has, and the impact that narratives have on young minds, impressionable minds, and vulnerable minds. I saw right then in those eyes, these kids are at risk of becoming radicalized, at risk of becoming extreme later on in their lives, because we're already starting them from a very young age with this narrative, which is being pumped through the national media. So that gave me my kind of passion for that kind of issue, and that was kind of 2007, 2008-ish, 2009, and then in 2009, 2010. I was again looking at the Middle East and working for the Ministry of Defense on the topic of, or the problem of, the social media revolutions, or the Arab Spring, whatever you want to call it, and seeing for me at that point actually how the two things intersected. What had been a problem for the mainstream media in causing the problems with the kids in the youth centres in the UK in 2007 2008 became actually more of a user-generated content issue, or user-generated content kind of topic in 2010, 2011. And that was the ability for people in Egypt, for example, to share their stories with the world, share the issues of that regime, and to organize themselves faster than the security apparatus had ever had to respond before. So there was a number of things that contributed to the success of the revolution in Egypt, but social media was a big part of that. And I think for me, that was the kind of shining light of like, wow, look at what social media can achieve when we use it in good ways. That for me was like the pinnacle of what social media did. So I've seen the worst of the impacts on human lives, and I've seen the power of the tool set of social media. And then, like everyone else over the last 10 years, I've seen the decline of the impact of that tool set, I think, for forces of good internationally. And then only this year I kind of started my journey at Factmata to get back involved and work on that. I'm working on PR and comms and AI in between. Less interesting than Afghanistan and Iraq, but that's what brought me back to Factmata.
That's awesome. It seems definitely like we're all kind of those kids that are in London 15 years ago to you now, because of I don't know, we're all kind of in the same boat with the negative impact of social media these days. So you've been at this a while. Z, how heavily does KingsCrowd rate management experience, and how does his background, how did that enter into your research report?
Yeah, so on our algorithm, first of all, Factmata scored a 5 out of 5 total rating, which is very rare.
Because of his experience, like he's been doing this for 15 years.
And for the team sub-score, it's a really high 4.5 out of 5. And and if you could, you can elaborate on how did you and your team come together, and your other team members in your C-suite?
Yeah, so I was recruited by Dhruv, who we were also talking to before the call. So Dhruv, kind of Forbes 30 under 30, the rock star who basically started the whole journey and kind of engaged people like Mark Cuban and Craig Newmark and those guys. So I started talking to Dhruv maybe in the last part of last year, but really more heavily in the first part of this year, on the tech that we'd built, and basically working with Dhruv to work out, okay, given the tech that we've built over the last 3 or 4 years, the $3.6 million that we've invested in the tech, like what is the best way, what is the laser focused version of this tech? What is the laser focused, like productized version of this tech? And came to the realization that we wanted this to get out to agencies and brands to basically arm everyone else with the tool set to fight this kind of problem. We didn't want to be the company who arbitrated the truth on behalf of everyone else. We wanted to basically just flag this kind of stuff for them. So that required a certain set of skills to bring that to life, to build a SaaS product, to scale it, and it's got an AI ML kind of core. So the team we brought together, so Ibrahim Sharaf, who's kind of a legend in ML and NLP, actually from Egypt, where he was actually also in the armed forces previously. We did kind of a getting to know you session.
What is up with all you guys?
By the way, I was in the armed forces. Like, so yeah, Ibrahim kind of works at one of the Middle East's largest startups and is basically an expert in ML and NLP, which is going to be a core part of what we do going forwards. Adam Ehab, also from Egypt, worked at a couple of different sites. One of them got acquired by StatsBomb. So basically, it was sports statistics. So you can imagine huge scale, huge volume. And that's kind of what we're dealing with as well. Basically, we're dealing with online content, of which there is just vast scale. So we've got two guys basically specializing in AI and NLP, and specializing in scaling those kind of pipelines that we need to kind of process that amount of data. And then we've recruited, I guess, a bunch of people who come from random backgrounds that you wouldn't expect. But the thing about this particular topic, which I think is the interesting thing, is it's not so much about your background, it's about your passion and understanding of the future of the internet, of fake news, and for solving this kind of problem. So we've recruited a bunch of people who either studied it, they spent their lives thinking about it, and they are working in it now because they're passionate about it. So yeah, that's kind of where we've recruited from, or where we continue to recruit from. It's like we don't have a shortage of people wanting to work for Factmata. We get to choose the people who actually, it doesn't matter about their background so much. It's like, how much do you really care and understand this problem?
Awesome.
Which I guess maybe contributed somewhat to our scoring, that there's clearly a passion there, which you need in startups.
For sure. So you said something really interesting, which is you didn't want to just throw your product out there and just try to solve the world's fake news problem. You're trying to focus in, which is I would argue one of the most important things, feel free to chime in here, Z, for a startup to do is focus on a core power user. PayPal did it. That's how they got the power users on eBay to use it. That's how that business blew up, 20 years ago now. Elon Musk did it with Tesla, of course. He built the high-end, expensive, kind of beta roadster 15 years ago now, or maybe even more. And now you're going to the PR agencies. So just for our viewers to understand, let's pretend I'm a PR agency and I manage, I don't know, Britney Spears or something. It doesn't matter. Use case, what does Factmata's product do for me as a PR agency?
Got it. And so Britney Spears would be an interesting. We've not run Britney Spears through the algorithm.
Something to do later. Free Britney, although she is free now, I think so.
So if we were looking at Britney Spears as an individual, basically, I guess the point to make is we can run our algorithms over any topic online. So whether it's an individual's name like Britney Spears, or whether it's a brand like Adidas, or whether it's a topic of conversation like climate change or vaccines. Really, what we do is look online for all that content. So tweets, articles, Facebook posts, whatever we can find through our kind of data aggregator partnerships. We aggregate all that kind of content together, and then we run over that content with a couple of different algorithms. So the first is our kind of what we call our narrative monitoring product. And that effectively looks for what are the common themes and common opinions that join all this content together. So in the case of Britney Spears, there's undoubtedly millions of comments online about Britney Spears if you search the whole of the internet. So, and that will spike in terms of volume per day and things like that. But the thing we're trying to work out is what are the themes that connect to all that, so that we can effectively make all of that content, raise it up a level, so it's a human manageable amount of content. So for Britney Spears, there may only be 3 or 4 themes. Maybe Britney Spears deserves this. Her father was doing wrong, or maybe some people thinking that actually her father was protecting her. Right? What are the different opinions being shared that create all those underlying mentions? So basically, it's a time-saving.
And you give me a list of those 4 things, basically, or what? Like when you say you
exactly. So we give you a dashboard. We give you a dashboard which shows you those narratives, shows you how they're changing over time. in terms of growing or shrinking. Shows you who's behind those narratives. So who's actually making those opinions, who's got the loudest voice of the, Britney Spears' father was actually doing right by her, right? Who's the loudest voice there? Because if you're working with Britney Spears now, you want to find out who those people are and see if you can engage with them or turn them to whatever your version of the narrative is. And that's what all companies and brands are trying to do now online, is engage in authentic conversations, work out who is having these conversations, working out what they should be saying to engage them authentically and in that kind of way. And that's the first thing we do is effectively the narrative monitoring part. The second thing we do, and this is the thing more related to the conversation we just had, is for each of those narratives, we then run 19 different unique individual machine learning models over those narratives and figure out, is this narrative racist? Is this narrative sexist? Is it toxic? Is it full of hate speech? Is it a religious attack? But also, what is the sentiment of this? Is it joyful? Is it happy? Is it sad? Is it angry? And to a degree, it's the combination of all those signals together which allow our clients to make sense of the internet. Because, for example, we have a fake news model. We can tell you this narrative, fake news, because all the stylistic and the lexical cues tell us this looks like fake news. But you need to kind of look at that in context, potentially with our satirical model or with our humor model, right? Because that potentially gives you another angle that someone's being intentionally satirical about something. And that's really important when it comes to things like racism and sexism, because what we don't want to do is accidentally flag someone talking and appropriately talking and highlighting the issue of racism and sexism, and accidentally flagging it as bad content in and of itself.
Right.
Because that might divert attention or prevent people from wanting to advertise on those pages, etc.
Right.
Or engage in that kind of content. So we're trying to find the harmful content, but it takes a broad suite of tools that we've got to effectively, really, truly give our clients that insight.
Right. You don't want it to have a negative effect on the people who are actually, advocating, anti-racism and things that's good. But exactly. Speaking of NLP and sentiment analysis, can you just elaborate on how we're able to gather the data and how robust is your database?
So the data, we didn't want to, I guess, repeat or solve a problem that's already been solved. So there's a whole bunch of players out there who have done a really good job of scouring the internet and building those databases. So we don't do the job of going ourselves to the internet. We want to use trusted, kind of reliable providers of that data. So we use a couple of different providers. Like Twitter, we go direct to Twitter via the Firehose. And for Reddit, we're working with a company called Social Gist, who are an authorized provider of Reddit data. So we don't scrape, we don't get it through third parties where that data isn't is captured in an illegal way or in a way that's going to harm people's data privacy. We're capturing all that data via trusted, authentic providers.
Gotcha.
Cool. So taking a step back real quick, this leads us to our next investor question. Is actually posted on your WeFundraise page. What determines what is fake news? Because, oh boy, I'm not going to give a real world example, although there's a couple that come to mind, but how do you define fake news? Because that in and of itself could be subjective depending on who you ask.
Yeah. Absolutely, and this was the fundamental challenge we set out to solve. We didn't want to make the problem worse, right? The problem of fake news happens because of bias.
Fake news, fake news. Yeah.
Yeah. And the problem is of even calling it fake news, right? What we're really referring to is misinformation and disinformation, which is a big business, right? This is a multi-billion-dollar business now globally. So we did want to make that problem worse by applying our own biases to what we think is true or not, because the easy fact-checking routes is where you've got a reliable, trusted, absolutely authentic source of information like the national statistics or whatever. You can go and check those facts, but the vast majority of the facts out online are in this gray area where it is subjective. And therefore it's really hard, one, to scale anything in an automated fashion to solve that problem, but two, it's also really hard to avoid a bias issue. In fact, there's always going to be a bias issue with it when a human is making that judgment. So we didn't want to set out to basically make that problem worse. What we wanted to do is arm more people with the tool set to basically find that kind of content for themselves. So it doesn't matter, we are not making a judgment on left versus right or even up or down, doesn't matter to us. What we're going to do is find content that is, for example, entirely one-sided. Doesn't matter if it's entirely one-sided to the left or entirely one-sided to the right. one-sided content isn't good quality content because, right, it's hyper-partisan, it's trying to move you to an extreme. That's the kind of content we're trying to find. Other kinds of content we're trying to find highly subjective content, or just, this is kind of a large part of our fake news model. It's looking for content which just doesn't look like good quality. Like, it's not written well, the arguments are poor. So that is an indication that some of this content could be fake or could be created with an intent to mislead. And that's the content we're trying to highlight. But effectively, once we've highlighted it, it's for our clients to decide what they want to do about it. And we will sell to our product to the left, to the right, as long as you're responsible with the truth, as long as you're kind of, respecting of the facts, we'll sell you the product and we'll use it, and we'll keep an eye on what you're doing with the product. So obviously our tool could be used for good or bad. So yeah, as long as you're using our tool to promote disinformation, misinformation, as long as you're using it in a responsible manner, then we are not, I guess, we don't care whether you're from the left or from the right or any other political spectrum.
Yeah, so this actually leads to the next investor question we had here, which is how do you actually help with countering fake news? So if I'm hearing you right, your customers, the PR agency, whoever, comes a subscriber to your product, and then it's up to them. You're basically just empowering the individuals or the organizations in order to then decide what to do.
Exactly. The challenge that a lot of those organizations have right now is actually spotting that content before it's too late. So what we're doing is identifying those narratives much earlier than a human could possibly find. So if you're looking at 1 million mentions, right, you're going to be missing trends that are just starting off. They're growing, but you're not going to, as a human, you're going to see that trend until it's too late. It's already got way too many nodes. It's already been shared on too many platforms, and for all you know, it's maybe a day or two away from getting mainstream news attention, in which case it's going to blow up. So we're trying to help the humans using our products by using AI to identify those narratives much earlier. Potentially even as small as 3 or 4 similar opinions could become what we call a narrative. So that in our product could be, if there's, and there's a lot of this right now, obviously, claims that a particular vaccine is going to give you brain cancer, or a vaccine is going to give you this new insert your outcome here. So if that new narrative is starting off, whilst it's 5 opinions or it's 10 opinions being shared on Facebook or Twitter, it might be something to worry about. But if today it's 10 and tomorrow it's 20 and the next day it's 40, then that's showing that narrative is potentially going to go viral. You need to basically get ready, right? You can either prepare your lines, you can look at who's started it, who's sharing it, engage with those people and turn them off quickly, but you're better prepared. So we're really an early warning system for that kind of content. But the other flip side of it is, if that gets past you, right, those narratives blow up, then who's behind those narratives? And what is the thrust of their point, right? Because if you're trying to look at it from the ground up, individual, it's hard for you to work out, how do we really disperse this narrative? How do you really attack this narrative or prove it? Like, what are the fundamental points? If we're gathering all that kind of content together in a narrative, you can see how it's kind of growing over time, you can start to work out more easily what are the key points we need to make to knock this narrative down. And you can actually see the impact of that effort, because you can see less people sharing, less people liking, and you can see the counter narratives that you're going to be progressing, taking over in terms of the share of overall conversation. So it's very early warning, it's education on how to engage, and it's measurement of your impact over time.
Can you give us, all the audience here today, use case or a customer, just some kind of situation, like a real world example of what you just described?
Yes. Who can I talk about? The challenge of NDAs, I think, and not having asked anyone in advance permission. So I can mention things like, so we have a client who was, it's going to be hard to describe that one without giving away. Let's go for, so we had a client looking at, they had a gut health product. So they were looking for ways of engaging with the audience in terms of gut health, right? And one, looking for misinformation, disinformation around, eat this herb and it will fix your IBS. Eat this and it will, that kind of stuff. So they were tracking that and engaging with that kind of content. But then, and this is an interesting example, it wasn't exactly an intended outcome, but the ability of our tool to spot those narratives really early worked really well for this particular client, because they were selling a product which is dealing with IBS, right? Which isn't necessarily the sexiest of topics. You know, that's how you know it's real. So I wouldn't create IBS as a right. So so they
noticed
were
you
looking
avoided
at,
COVID and politics and everything else. So good job.
straight for IBS. So they were looking through the narratives and seeing who to engage with and how to promote their product. And they came across a small subset, small narrative. Didn't have a lot of popularity, not a lot of people engaged with the narrative, but there was enough people sharing their opinion that actually IBS was something to be proud of. And there was basically all this kind of merchandise called IBS Warrior, hashtag IBS Warrior. You could buy sweatpants and sweatshirts and kind of merchandise with IBS Warrior. And then it completely surprised them that this segment of their market even existed, that people are out there kind of owning that condition rather than being defined by it.
They're buying T-shirts.
So
like, this is crazy.
Exactly. Right. Right.
Gosh.
And they would never have known that that segment existed. But to them, if you're a company or a brand, looking at these people creating this new kind of narrative, then that's really exciting for you, because actually that's a whole, if you can support that segment, if you can engage with that segment and grow that segment, that's a whole part of the market you can own for yourself. So that's not necessarily, that's not a misinformation, disinformation thing. That's simply having a good understanding of what is being said online and spotting trends that a human would have missed. So that's kind of, I guess, an example I can
I'm going to get on Amazon and look for one of these T-shirts. What do you think, Z? We buy them for the whole company or something?
We could.
Oh man, I appreciate your conundrum with NDAs and everything, Anthony. So again, I appreciate that. Last investor question that got submitted here for us today. What is the plan for the business? Z, I don't know if you want to dive into this a little bit more as to how it relates to our report or the, the executive summary or something. But, and what are your plans for the future? Do you want to sell out? Do you want to go public? Like, what can you tell us?
Yeah, what's your exit strategy there?
Yeah, so I guess I'll explain where the crowdfund fits in our strategy overall. So this crowdfund raise was for two purposes. One was that actually looking at our backers, and some of the names we mentioned, there's a lot of similarities from those backers, being generally, for the most part, rich white guys from America. So being an AI company, right, we've got to be diverse. We've got to invest in our diversity and make sure that the kind of where the algorithms are coming together and how we look on life and how we look at the internet is as diverse in thought as we can. So we're hiring for that already. We've got really good kind of male-female split, but also race and religion, geographic dislocation. We've done everything we can for the company, but our backers were very homogenous. So one thing about the crowdfund raise was to increase the diversity of our backers, and it's actually been really interesting, the kind of the diversity of the backers from left, from right, from different countries, different languages. Actually, this topic kind of gets a lot of different people excited. So we wanted to increase the diversity, and that was useful. The second reason we wanted to raise right now is that we didn't want to go straight out to VCs, which is going to be our next fundraising goal, because we wouldn't be in the strongest negotiating position, because technically we're sort of pre-revenue, we've done experiments, we've done trials, but pre-proper revenue, I would say, because our products haven't launched yet. They're launching literally next week. So it wouldn't be a great time to go out to a VC, but actually because of the way that crowdfunding works, people are backing the mission and they're backing the company. They're not necessarily kind of looking, where's your EBITDA at? So right. That was more interesting as a way of running, kind of raising funds in a way that suited us. So that's this step. The next step is get those products out, show traction, demonstrate that we've got product market fit, which we know we've got because we've had the trial clients go through and they're all wanting to sign up for the products. We're happy that the product is now there and it's ready to go. So the aim is spend the crowdfund raise plus other money that we've already got in the bank, etc., on basically promoting those products as much as we can, get as much traction as we can, and be in a much stronger position to negotiate a VC raise by around kind of Q1-ish next year. And with that money, scale, dominate their market, because we know this is I know, and the thing is, it's hard when you're a startup to say this because no one believes you, but we've honestly got the best tech. So we know because we've had it independently validated by market leaders in each of the segments we're playing in. So we know we've got the best tech. We know
So
our
if you
product
say you have the best tech, sorry to interrupt, if you say you have the best tech, what happens if you put that through your system? Would that come up as true, or I'm just kidding?
it would come up as hyper-partisan, like entirely one-sided, probably.
For sure.
Or clickbait, maybe. Might probably score pretty high in the clickbait model.
Yeah.
Who's got the best tech? Click to find out. So that's kind of going into VC raise, and then the plan is dominate the next year. The whole of next year is basically dominate that market. We are going to be the very first self-serve provider of AI insights in this market. Everyone else is providing, and this is kind of part of our ethos as well. Everyone else in that market is doing kind of enterprise sales, which I've done before, and it's slow, it's hard going. You win a client at a time, and it takes you a while to really scale. We want to get this out not just to every agency and small B2C brand or brands out there, because that actually makes the most commercial sense. We want to do that because those guys right now can't afford those big tools. And there's bigger players out in this market, giant media monitoring firms who have a really broad product set, but it's also really expensive. But we want to make ours really, really low barrier to entry. So if you're a small agency, a mom and pop agency, or a family firm, and you've just spun out and you're on your own, or you're a journalist, or you're for good cause like an NGO, whatever, those guys are going to get it for free. But we want to make the agencies, we want to make this available to many more types of firm, because the challenge is we're not going to solve this problem by selling this only to a small number of really big firms. We've got to get this kind of tool set out to as many organizations as possible, so that everyone is armed and can patrol and understand their little corner of the internet, their little part of the conversation. If they're better able to monitor that and identify the bad content, that's how we scale the solution to this problem. So it makes sense commercially, but also makes sense for our strategy and our vision to clean up the internet if we do this way. So that's kind of our goal.
That was a heck of a way to end the fireside chat. I was going to be like, hey, do you get the last word or whatever, but kudos. That was exactly what we needed. Thank you to everybody that tuned in to today's fireside chat. And especially thanks to Anthony for joining us as our guest of honor. And Z, thanks for getting up early, joining the webinar from the West Coast. We got some diversity here. And Anthony, enjoy your fish and chips.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Yeah.
Cheers, brother. Yep. Bye.